Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to talk a little bit more about the Setting API, which I briefly introduced in my previous video. So as you can see, I have a little program set up here. Apparently it's got a difficulty because we have some text that says the difficulty is currently set to normal, and there's a link that I can use to reload the page, but that won't make any difference. However, on the side here, we have this new settings button. And this time, when we click into it, we actually have a setting. So we have the text choose a difficulty level, and then we have a drop-down menu, and I can choose easy, normal, hard, or very hard. Let's say we choose hard, for example. And if I press OK, well, at first, nothing will happen because changing things in this settings button, doesn't reload the main page, with one single exception, which I'll probably deal with in a future video. However, I have changed that variable, and so when I reload it this time, it'll now say that the difficulty is set to hard. So we can see that the program is doing what it should do. It can give us an option here, and when we make choices, the program can pick up the choice that we made and make whatever changes come from that. So in this particular case, depending on the story of the game, you might have harder attribute rolls, or you might have more encounters with monsters if you have harder settings, and fewer if you have easier settings, or whatever it may be. So as usual, I'd like to spend the rest of the video just going through the code. So there is a little bit of code in the single passage in this program, but when we're dealing with the Setting API, most of what we're doing is in the JavaScript section. So let's zoom in a little bit. We go to Story, and then this one here, JavaScript. We have, this is in all of my stories. This just makes it not do a line break when there's a line break in the code, which is necessary if you want to have any kind of good layout. This is something we talked about in the last video, which is just adding the title and the subtext. And there's some notes about how we could have laid it out differently. And here we have the new thing. We have added a setting in the form of a drop-down menu, although it calls it a list in this particular context. So let's go through what we've got. We've got capital S for setting, dot. Note that it's not settings as with this one. It's setting.addHeader, and this is the Setting API, even though the button says settings, plural. And of course, if you get that wrong, it won't work, and that can be a little bit, it can be a little bit hard to spot what you've done wrong from personal experience. So we have setting.addList, with setting and list being capital initial letters. And then we have a bracket. Then we have in quotes the name of the variable that we're changing. In this case, the difficulty. Then we have a comma, some curly brackets, whose equivalent is there, and then the equivalent of the normal bracket is there. Of course, the closing off of the normal bracket is there, and then we have three things that we need to specify: label, list, and default, each of which is followed by a colon. Label is just what's the text that's going to display next to the drop-down menu. List is what is the drop-down menu going to consist of. So easy, normal, hard, very hard. And then which one does it start as? Because of course the player might not want to change the settings. They might just want to keep going. They might want to use the defaults, or they might set up the settings and find that it, because these settings can persist with different plays of the game, which is something we haven't really encountered so far. But again, I'll talk about that in future videos. But in any case, we want to have a default value. If the player doesn't make a choice, which one are we going to set it to? And in this case, of course, you'd probably make normal the default. Then you close off the curly brackets and the normal brackets, and then you have a semicolon. So that's very straightforward. So how do we refer to that variable that we've set up? Well, there's a couple of different ways. We can do it this way or this other way that I've got in the comment down here. Now note that this time it's settings plural. So it's a little bit confusing that sometimes it's the singular and sometimes it's the plural, but you know, it is that. You've just got to be aware of that. And so we have the difficulty is currently set to, and then we say print settings dot difficulty. Settings is a word that's sort of hardwired into the program. Difficulty, this is just the label that we decided for ourselves. That's what this is. So as well as doing it as settings dot difficulty, we could also do it as if it were an entry in an array. So we can go settings, well, sort of like that. We're actually using quotes as well. Whereas normally, if we were doing this with an array, we'd use those sort of quotes, singular quotes. But anyway, similar. We could have done print settings square bracket quote difficulty quote end square bracket. Would have done exactly the same thing. And of course, as well as printing the value, we can also you know, have, for example, if settings difficulty is equal to normal, then do something else if it's equal to very hard. You know, we can do with it all of the things that we would do with a normal variable. And that is, to some extent, that's all you need. There's a little bit more that we need to talk about because there's some, there's a couple of other features. There's different ways that we can set up options, which I would like to talk about. And there's also some sort of consequences of the way this, the way the setting API works that might be a bit, that might cause outcomes that aren't what you wanted to happen. But I'll get into that in future videos. I will leave it there for now. I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.